Gordon Harris is the President and CEO of SFU Community Trust. As such, he is responsible for UniverCity, award-winning sustainable community at SFU, 1,000 homes. And for those of you who haven't taken the opportunity to go up to SFU and have a look at the development there, it really is quite extraordinary, and Gordon is responsible for that. He's a highly recognized urban planner, development strategist, and real estate market analysis who has received many awards, but what really jumped out at me is that he was the recipient of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal for his lifetime contributions to community building in Canada, which I think is really quite extraordinary, Gordon, and congratulations. He's a leading commentator on the challenges of planning for an aging population. I didn't say anything. So please join me in welcoming Gordon.
Hello there, and thank you for having me and us here tonight. I was really pleased to be asked to be here because I really like Ambleside. I don't live in West Vancouver, nor did I grow up here, but I certainly know from talking to many people who did both grow up here and still live here, that it's always been West Vancouver's real downtown, its town center. And thanks to its character, its history, its location, and the people who love it, it's still, despite a number of things, bumps over the years, still the heart of West Vancouver. And in a way, West Vancouver started here. This was really how the community came to be. It's the site of the first North Shore ferry dock. And those of you who are from here know that and know that history. But I am going to touch on just a bit of the evolution, how we got to where we are at the moment. The ferry was a crucial connection across Burrard Inlet. It operated from 1909 until 1947. But even before the ferry went out of service in 1947, things had really begun to change here for Ambleside. In 1938, the Lions Gate Bridge opened, and that made it easier for people to just drive through Ambleside on their way to somewhere else. In 1950, oops, there's the ferry landing, and I'm going to remember to move the slides. In 1950, Park Royal opened its doors, giving people another destination to drive to. And of course, in 1964, the first segments of what's now the Upper Levels Highway opened up. And for Ambleside, that meant that people were able to simply bypass it entirely, take the highway and get onto the bridge. Yet today, it's great to see how strongly Ambleside is doing and coming back into its own. Worth considering that what we can all do to think about how it prospers in the years to come. So what makes Town Centre really light up? People. And we'll all be talking about that tonight, I suspect, in different ways. People and people living in close proximity. So when we think of the origins of a town centre and the underlying ethos of the town centre, we can go back, of course, to the Greek agora, literally the gathering place. And for any of you who are of Greek origin in the audience tonight, I apologize in advance for the pronunciation of the next couple of words. Because the ancient agora of Athens was, of course, the place where freeborn citizens would assemble to hear political speeches, to muster for military service, or to hear from their council members. And then in the grand tradition of shopkeepers saw that gathering population, and they came in, and what followed next was a marketplace. Shops and services opened, artisans' workshops opened up as well. And so agora gave rise very quickly to two derivative verbs. Agoreo, I'm thinking that's how it's said, which means I speak in public, and agorazo, which means I shop. So if that's all there was to it, town centres would be nothing more than an auditorium surrounded by a shopping centre. But we know that both it's the crowd and the complexity of the activity that makes a great high street or town centre flourish. And the best high streets or main streets or local town centers often arise at a crossroads. So in the case of Ambleside, that was the landing, that was the ferry dock. So you find a location with lots of people passing through, you start finding reasons for them to stop and linger, a place for them to speak in public, talk to one another. Then you add that layer of commercial activity, beginning perhaps with food services, a grocery store, the stuff of every day. And then you can add more to that as the crowd grows and they linger longer. You can add dining and entertainment, doctor's offices, dry cleaners, barber, the barber we heard about that you all go to. Soon enough, you have something that is a center for all of the cultural, the artistic, the athletic, spiritual, and political life of the city. So great high streets and town centers are important as social spaces, critically important, places of bustling activity, but also quiet pleasures. A successful town center is a reflection of the character, the aspirations, and the ambitions of a community. It is very much of the community. And that's why no two are alike, and no set of solutions to one is necessarily a solution for another. And it's why they can change over time, they can fade or fight back against the competition and evolve to meet entirely new needs. So I've thought about this a lot over my career, first as a retail market analyst and later as an urban planner. It's been my job to help places figure out what makes a town or city work, what makes them livable, and what makes them sustainable. I've learned to look at the wisdom of others who I know have been looking at this as well. And one of the great sources of urban information in Canada is the Canadian Urban Institute. It did a great piece a few years ago looking at Canadian downtowns. The title, The Value of Investing in Canadian Downtowns, I think is very germane to what we're talking about here tonight. So the Canadian Urban Institute went across the country from Charlottetown on the East Coast through southern Ontario, across the prairies, and onto the North Shore. Now, unfortunately, instead of turning left, they turned right. And so the city they ended up finishing the study in was the city of North Vancouver, not here. But it's still relevant for what we're going to talk about tonight because it posed 5 questions, questions that are relevant and ones we must think about. And they touch on these headings. And first question, does the downtown have an integral and central role in the life of the wider city? So as we ask these questions, think about Ambleside and where we are today. Does the downtown benefit from a multiplicity of strong, bold leaders who collaborate to achieve and sustain a shared vision? Does the downtown have a robust and innovative economy? Is the downtown vibrant, livable, and connected? Is the city investing strategically in its future? There's obviously a great deal of interest in the future of Ambleside. And those are all great questions, and they're essential questions from a planning perspective. And for our discussion tonight, I would add one more question. And I think it's the one that has helped me in my focus in the last 10 years in the time that I've been president and CEO of SFU Community Trust. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Michael Geller is in the room tonight. And Michael is my predecessor and the first president and CEO of SFU Community Trust. And so some of the things I talk about in the next minute or two that sound like I might be taking credit for them, I'm very conscious that much was done before I arrived, Michael. So looking at a new community on Burnaby Mountain adjacent to the main campus of Simon Fraser University, it was SFU's land, and they wanted to create a community and fill in some gaps. SFU was a very isolated hilltop campus, weekend wasteland. It was a commuter campus. The community was meant to do a number of things, including creating endowment wealth, but also simply animating and activating the campus. And clearly a complete community is going to need a town center. And so I've long been thinking about it and the implications as it relates to those questions we just looked at. We have certainly invested strategically. This was one of the very first elements of the community that was put in place, a town square. We've worked to engender vibrancy, livability, and connectedness. We've acted strategically to ensure a robust, innovative, and resilient economy. We've tried to lead boldly and to collaborate with others who share our vision. But at UniverCity and here in Ambleside, there's another take, or an addendum at least, to the question, does the downtown have an integral and central role in the life of the wider city? And that is, does the downtown serve the unique needs of the local community? And that's fundamental to the success, I believe, of town centers. For example, at UniverCity, we needed a mix of services that would satisfy both our growing population, and today we're at 5,500 people, on our way to somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 people in the next 4 years. But we also had an existing user group. So we had the students, the faculty and staff at Simon Fraser University. So we needed things like a full-service grocery store, a variety of restaurants and cafes, and the local market also responded very well to our introduction of a BC liquor store last spring. And it was obvious we needed the town square, which was the slide you saw a moment ago. But there were other things that we needed that might already be in place or nearby here. We needed an elementary school, and we needed a child care center. A child care center that is described by the International Living Future Institute as the greenest child care center on the planet. And all great high streets share a common set of characteristics. They're accessible, they're convenient. You can walk, bike, push a stroller, take a bus, or arrive by car. You can be there for one thing, or you can be there for many, for a few minutes, or for the whole afternoon. You can come for coffee, you can go to the gym, meet friends over lunch, have a romantic dinner with your partner. These are all things that you could do in a shopping mall or in an outlet center, but it wouldn't be the same. It isn't the same. The town center is yours, and to succeed, it must feel uniquely yours. It must be a reflection, and we talked about the values and aspirations of the community, and it needs to reflect your choices as well. And if it does, it won't mind if you're only there for a minute. He knows you'll be back, you're nearby. So how does all this reflect on Ambleside? Clearly, regardless of the shopping competition down the road, elsewhere on the North Shore and across the bridge, Ambleside has shown that it can remain vibrant and innovative, that it can meet the unique challenges of its community. So things are changing. We know from the work of Grosvenor that significant investment in Ambleside is underway with the 1300 block. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did a wee bit of consulting on that project, and really my job was to confirm or reassure that it could indeed be a catalyst for retail revitalization in Ambleside. And Cressy's Bellevue project as well is proof of that assumption that it can be a catalyst for investment and rehabilitation. Obviously, more people are committed to Ambleside's future, perhaps, than they once were. This kind of development changes the historic character of the area, unquestionably. There's always a risk with some level of new investment and a certain amount of growth in population, and I know others will be talking about that tonight. The town center of tomorrow can look an awful lot like the town center of today, just older and with more vacancy. So the reinvestment will change some of the characteristics that we are all familiar with and associate with Ambleside. When Grosvenor was looking at Ambleside, one of the things they stumbled upon very early on in their research was that about $36 million in annual spending on restaurants, just restaurant category, alone was leaving the West Vancouver every year. They fixed on something I think we all know, that once people get in their car, whether it's to pick up a coffee or something missing for the next meal, a lot of their retail dollars will follow with that trip. And if they make a habit of doing that, getting in the car and driving past here for something else, then they've made a choice, and that choice precludes using Ambleside in the way it can be best used. So I'm in the community, obviously, of people who think it's worth investing in new and evolving amenities and services for Ambleside, and in a way that supports and respects what Ambleside is, the Ambleside we love today, so that it will remain robust and healthy tomorrow. So for anyone who's thinking of making an investment, whether that's opening a new shop, putting up a new building, or anything in between, the question that you have to ask is, what does Ambleside need? What do the people within walking distance need? What do they want in their own community? And what new amenities and services will help ensure that it continues to have an integral role in the life of the wider community, West Vancouver? Excuse me. We can guess at the answers to that. We can also look at the larger community or communities that Ambleside serves, and it's going to tell us some things very quickly that we need to pay attention to. The immediate market, West Vancouver, is about 40,000, a little over 40,000 people. That's a population that's actually been declining a tiny bit over the last couple of years. We also know that a quarter of West Van's population is age 65 or older. And in his introduction, Jess noted that I've spent a fair bit of time looking at planning for an aging population. I think it should be obvious why that's a concern to me. I am age 65 or older. So there are a couple of adjustments to be made in the next few decades. We have to think even more seriously about mobility and accessibility for an aging population. As the baby boom bulges into old age, it's a planning concern that affects every single Canadian community in the next quarter century and beyond. West Vancouver also has a very high ratio of single-person households. About 28% of all households in West Vancouver are occupied by a single person. That might affect the kind of services you want to provide in Ambleside. And when you think of Ambleside, particularly if we've driven across the Lionsgate Bridge, as a very uniformly wealthy market, and it certainly has a high proportion of high-income households, but also has a great many older people who are depending on investments, pension income, and other non-earned employment income sources. That too will change what they're looking for and what that mix needs to be. So we can't forget those legacy residents. Many of them are in the Ambleside catchment area, might be very price sensitive, something that you wouldn't necessarily leap to when you first think about West Vancouver. And so the town center, Ambleside, has to respond to those unique needs. And first, we have to understand what they are to avoid making mistakes. And there's another aspect that I think is crucial in the planning of every community, and that is sustainability, which for me always means social, economic, and environmental sustainability, with a lot of emphasis on the social sustainability piece. I've already made references and comments about the social and economic elements. Prudent investment will ensure people continue to gather here, to speak in public, and to shop. But looking out at the water, it's also essential that we consider environmental resilience. Ambleside is on the water. That means looking after the park, looking after the seawall, and making sure that Ambleside is protected from things like sea level change. It also means building and maintaining a whole range of services that locals can conveniently access on foot rather than driving really any distance unnecessarily. Looking after our environment is a question of quality of life today for us, but it's really about tomorrow and for everyone yet to come. So that's my final comment for now, so we can get through and onto the discussion. Let Ambleside be inviting, prosperous, and resilient. Let it be a place that honors its past and welcomes a safe and healthy future. Thanks very much.